What if the world's most controversial royal couple was just told, in the politest yet sharpest way possible, that they are not welcome on one of the biggest continents on Earth? What if a sitting prime minister, not a tabloid, not a commentator, not some anonymous palace staffer, personally intervened to reject their request? And what if this wasn't just a political decision, but a signal that something deeper, something messier, is unfolding behind the scenes? That is where our story begins, with a door slammed shut, quietly yet unmistakably, on Harry and Meghan Markle's attempt to return to Australia. It sounds dramatic. It sounds unbelievable. But the more you dig, the stranger it gets. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because this wasn't just a routine, we'll check the schedule and get back to you. This wasn't a vague, not the right time, kind of diplomatic brush-off. No, this was a deliberate, carefully worded, strategically delivered rejection from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's office. And once you understand why it happened, you'll realize this saga is bigger than Harry and Meghan. Much bigger. But let's not jump ahead too fast. Let's start with the moment the alleged rejection leaked. A moment that sent shockwaves through Canberra, Westminster, and, apparently, Montecito itself. Imagine this scene. It's early morning in Australia. Parliament staffers shuffle into their offices, prepared for what they assume will be a normal day. Coffee in hand. Newspapers scattered across desks. The usual politically charged morning atmosphere buzzing faintly in the background. But then something shifts, a sudden ripple of confusion mixed with amusement. Heads turn. Screens light up. A message is forwarded. Then forwarded again. And again. By noon, the entire building knows. Harry and Meghan have been refused. Not delayed. Not postponed. Refused. And not by an intern, not by a nameless assistant, but through a directive carrying the authority of the Prime Minister himself. The leaked wording is short, sharp, almost cutting in its simplicity. A denial dressed in diplomatic language. A rejection wrapped in respectability. A no that echoes louder than any yes ever could. Why? That's the mystery. That's the question screaming underneath every political whisper and every media headline. But here's the twist. Australia had reasons long before Meghan and Harry even submitted their request. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. And it definitely wasn't unexpected. At least, not to the people who've been watching this boiling tension between the Sussexes and the Commonwealth nations for years. But let me ask you something. Why Australia? Why are Harry and Meghan so eager to return? Or try to return, in a moment where their global reputation is as unstable as ever? What were they hoping to gain? Redemption? A fresh start? A PR victory? Maybe even political alignment? And even more important, why now? Because timing matters. In politics, in monarchies, and especially in narratives. And if you think the Prime Minister's rejection was the peak of this story, you're about to discover there are layers beneath layers beneath layers. Spanning political strategy, public opinion, royal distrust, and the couple's own internal pressures. Before we peel all that back, let's pause. Why does this matter at this exact moment? It matters because Australia is not just any country. It is one of the most important pillars of the Commonwealth. It is a nation currently wrestling with questions about monarchy, identity, and political direction. It is a place Meghan and Harry once charmed during an early royal tour. Back when the world saw them as the fresh, modern faces of the monarchy. But today, times have changed. Public sentiment has shifted dramatically. Political priorities have shifted even more. And Harry and Meghan? They are walking controversies, whether fairly or unfairly, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So when their request landed on the Prime Minister's desk or the inbox of someone who answers to him, it was not just a routine diplomatic consideration. It was a test. A test of political alignment. A test of public tolerance. A test of what Australia wants its role to be in a world where the monarchy is both questioned and defended. And Anthony Albanese made a choice. A bold one. A choice that sends a message far beyond Canberra. A choice that echoes through Buckingham Palace and Montecito alike. He said no. But here's the part that makes every political watcher raise an eyebrow. The rejection didn't just block a visit. It exposed something. Something hidden. Something brewing. Something that suggests a deeper tension between Harry and Meghan and the larger Commonwealth network they once represented. Because the truth is, this wasn't the first time Australia pushed back, and it won't be the last. But what if I told you there's an earlier incident, an attempt for a private, informal visit, that fell apart quietly, long before this official request ever surfaced? What if I told you the Prime Minister wasn't the person who blocked that one? What if someone else, someone higher up the royal chain, stepped in? Now ask yourself, why would King Charles have concerns about Harry and Meghan visiting a Commonwealth nation? What did he know that made him quietly intervene? And how does this connect to the Australian government's current stance? At this point, you might be thinking, is this politics? Is this personal? Is this PR? Or is this something else entirely? This story has everything. Power dynamics, reputation wars, political optics, royal tensions, public backlash, and two people desperately trying to reshape their image in a world that seems increasingly tired of them. And yet, something still doesn't add up, does it? Because a prime minister doesn't just wake up one morning and decide to reject a high-profile visit, especially from a former senior royal, especially one who still carries the symbolic weight of his birthright. No, this decision was layered. It was strategic, calculated, deliberate, and judging by the early whispers coming out of Canberra, this rejection was not unanimous. There were debates behind closed doors, differences of opinion, advisors who argued that accepting the visit could boost Australia's soft diplomacy image, others who warned it would spark unnecessary chaos. So why did the no win? What was the tipping point? Or, who was the tipping point? Because someone, a person, a moment, a sentence, pushed the government from hesitation to rejection. And once that happened, the rest of the story unfolded like dominoes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because to understand why Prime Minister Albanese said no, we have to go back. Back to the first attempt. The secret one. The one that never made headlines, but started all of this. But before we go there, before we peel back that earlier, hidden rejection, there's something else you need to know. Something about Meghan's reaction. Something insiders claim shook her inner circle. Because when this latest rejection reached Montecito, Meghan was reportedly stunned. And not just stunned, offended, upset, furious, even determined to push back. Why? Because in her view, Australia was supposed to be the country that loved her most. The country where she and Harry were once adored. The country that embraced them during their early pregnancy. The country where crowds rushed to them with gifts and excitement and admiration. So what happened? How did the golden couple of that 2018 tour become the couple a prime minister refuses to invite back? And here's the hardest question of all. Is this rejection really about politics? Or is it about behavior? Because across Australia, across the media, across social platforms, one sentence keeps appearing. We don't want these two. Not, we don't want them right now. Not, we don't think this visit is a good idea. No, we don't want these two. It's blunt. It's emotional. And it reflects something far deeper than any single political decision. This is no longer about a visit. This is about reputation, about trust, about credibility, about the growing divide between the Sussexes and the very countries they were once meant to represent. And yet, despite all this, despite the rejection, despite the global reaction, the story is about to get even stranger. Because the rejection email was not the most shocking part. It was the name copied at the bottom. A name that reveals who knew about this visit. A name that hints at where the pressure came from. What if the most anticipated royal visit of the year never even had a chance to begin? What if a simple message, a few carefully chosen words, could topple plans, crush expectations, and send ripples across continents? That is exactly what happened when Harry and Meghan Markle's second request to visit Australia was quietly, yet decisively, rejected. And the world didn't even see it coming. It all started with an email. Short, polite, professional. But beneath the diplomacy, it carried a weight that could not be ignored. For most people, it would be just another message among thousands in a busy government inbox. But for the Sussexes, and for anyone paying attention to global headlines, this was a bombshell. The email read like a calm ocean on the surface, hiding a storm beneath. And once it leaked, the storm hit like a tidal wave. The first wave of shock came from the media. Headlines erupted. Social media went into overdrive. Some called it unprecedented, others called it overdue. But for insiders, the reaction wasn't entirely surprising. Behind the polite phrasing of, "We are unable to accommodate your request at this time," there were months of tension, behind-the-scenes whispers, and quiet warnings that this day might come. So who sent it? Was it Anthony Albanese himself, or an aide acting on his behalf? Some reports suggest it was the Prime Minister's office directly. Others claim a senior staffer finalized the wording, but the directive came straight from the top. Whoever it was, the impact was immediate. Inside Canberra, the corridors of power buzzed with speculation. Parliament staffers whispered in hallways. Advisors checked their phones repeatedly, unsure if what they were seeing was real. And one thing became abundantly clear: this was no ordinary rejection. The message carried authority, weight, and a subtle edge that hinted at more than just a casual no. Why Australia? Why would a prime minister actively block a visit that had already been planned, carefully orchestrated, and previously approved in principle? The answers lie in layers: political, personal, and public. Politically, Australia has been walking a delicate line in its relationship with the monarchy. While still part of the Commonwealth, there is a growing movement questioning the relevance of the royal family in a modern democracy. Inviting a controversial couple, even one with royal blood, risked inflaming debates, drawing protests, and complicating Australia's carefully managed international image. But politics alone doesn't explain it. Public sentiment played a role too. When Harry and Meghan first visited Australia, the reception was overwhelmingly positive. Crowds cheered, media coverage was flattering, and the couple basked in a wave of adoration. Yet fast forward a few years, and public opinion has shifted dramatically. The couple's global image is now polarizing, with fans and critics in almost equal measure. In a country that once adored them, a repeat visit carried risk. A risk of protest, ridicule, or worse, public embarrassment. And then there's the personal dimension, the one that rarely gets mentioned but is no less important. Anthony Albanese is not a man who takes public criticism lightly. He is a prime minister who understands optics, media influence, and the ripple effects of high-profile events. Allowing Harry and Meghan to return could be interpreted as an endorsement, or worse, an invitation to controversy. Albanese is a strategist, and strategists think not just about the immediate impact, but about long-term consequences. Inside Montecito, news of the rejection reportedly landed like a punch to the gut. Sources close to the couple say Meghan was furious, Harry stunned, and their team scrambling to figure out what went wrong. How could a visit they expected to be simple, even celebratory, be denied with such blunt finality? And why had the email leaked to the media before they even received a personal phone call or explanation? The answer may lie in timing. The request coincided with a particularly sensitive period for Australian politics. Major legislative debates were ongoing. Public sentiment around monarchy and Commonwealth relations was volatile, and the media, always hungry for scandal, was primed to amplify any perceived royal misstep. To deny the visit was, in effect, to control a narrative before it could spiral out of control. But there's more. Inside the Prime Minister's office, the rejection was not a unanimous decision. Advisors were split. Some argued that a visit could serve as a diplomatic bridge, improving Australia's visibility on the global stage and fostering goodwill. Others cautioned that Harry and Meghan's presence could overshadow local politics, create unnecessary distractions, and trigger public backlash. In the end, the cautionary voices prevailed. The decision was made: no visit. And yet, even within this seemingly simple decision, layers of intrigue emerge. Who suggested the wording of the email? Who signed off on it? Who decided this was the right moment to reject a royal request? According to insider reports, a name was copied at the bottom. Someone whose involvement raises eyebrows and hints at internal influence that extends beyond Canberra. That name, that small detail, could reveal who really controlled the narrative. Meanwhile, the global press had a field day. News outlets speculated wildly. Some framed it as a diplomatic slight. Others painted it as a personal snub. Social media erupted, with hashtags trending within hours. Hashtag No Sussex in Australia began appearing on Twitter, while TikTok users created viral clips debating the rejection. The world watched as a country's leader said no to two of the most high-profile figures of the decade. But the most interesting reactions were not public. They were private. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides and advisors reportedly monitored every headline, every social media trend, every whisper. Because while this might seem like a decision by the Australian government alone, royal insiders understood the implications. If Harry and Meghan were publicly rebuffed, it would reflect not just on them, but on the monarchy itself. The ripple effects could touch everything from Commonwealth relations to domestic PR campaigns. And here's the twist. This was not the first time Harry and Meghan faced rejection from Australia. There had been an earlier, quieter attempt to return, one that never made headlines. That request fell apart due to what insiders describe as intervention from the top, a subtle, behind-the-scenes nudge from Buckingham Palace, apparently intended to prevent embarrassment or diplomatic friction. But this second attempt was different. This time, the rejection came directly from the Prime Minister's office, with public exposure baked into the outcome. So the question becomes, what changed between the first attempt and the second? Was it timing? Public sentiment? Political pressure? Or had Harry and Meghan's own actions in the interim pushed Australia to draw a line in the sand? And it wasn't just the rejection itself that shocked people. It was how quickly it spread. In Montecito, Meghan's PR team reportedly scrambled to control the narrative. Calls were made, meetings held, strategies drafted and discarded. But no matter how quickly they tried to respond, the story had already captured global attention. Headlines were out, tweets were circulating, speculation ran rampant. For Harry, the impact was different but equally intense. Sources say he felt blindsided, not just by the rejection, but by how publicly it unfolded. While Meghan considered legal and PR responses, Harry was reportedly assessing the political and diplomatic implications. This wasn't just about a visit anymore. It was about perception, influence, and what their next moves would signal to the world. And this brings us to the central tension of the story. A prime minister's rejection is never just a rejection. It is a statement. It signals limits. It sets boundaries. It communicates what a country will, or will not, tolerate. And when that message comes in the form of a royal no, thank you, with the authority of government, it resonates far beyond the inbox. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of all is what happened next. After the initial shock, after the public reacted, after the media had its frenzy, insiders reported one final, jaw-dropping detail. The rejection email, while authoritative, also carried a subtle hint, a line that suggested this decision might not be as permanent as it seemed. Or perhaps it hinted that someone else, somewhere, had their own agenda, and this rejection was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Why would a country that once welcomed Harry and Meghan with open arms now push back so decisively? The answer is layered, complex, and surprisingly revealing about the intersection of politics, public sentiment, and the subtle pressures of monarchy. To understand Australia's refusal, we have to look at three intertwined threads: the political climate, the public's evolving perception of the Sussexes, and the underlying message the Prime Minister wanted to send. Let's start with politics. Australia, as part of the Commonwealth, has historically maintained a cordial, sometimes reverent relationship with the British royal family. Royal visits are seen as opportunities for soft diplomacy, cultural exchange, and media attention that benefits tourism and international standing. But times have changed. Public and political attitudes toward the monarchy have shifted dramatically in recent years, influenced by global movements questioning elitism, privilege, and the relevance of inherited power in a modern democratic world. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is a shrewd political operator, known for weighing both optics and outcomes before making decisions. Accepting a royal visit is no longer a simple ceremonial affair, it's a calculation. Every handshake, every photograph, every public statement is scrutinized, and the Sussexes, while undeniably high profile, are far from uncontroversial. In a political landscape where public perception can shift overnight, a visit by Harry and Meghan carried enormous risk. But let's dig deeper into public sentiment. The Australia that cheered the couple in 2018 is not the same Australia in 2025. Social media has amplified both support and criticism, giving voice to every perspective, and the narrative around the Sussexes has polarized dramatically. While some fans remain loyal, celebrating Meghan as a modernizer and Harry as a symbol of change, others have grown skeptical, frustrated, or even hostile. Reports of lawsuits, public statements about the monarchy and media controversies have transformed the couple from beloved figures into divisive ones. Polls conducted by Australian think tanks over the past 2 years reveal a stark reality. Public appetite for another Sussex visit is surprisingly low. A majority of respondents express fatigue with their media presence, concern about security costs, and skepticism about the purpose of the trip. Another factor often overlooked is timing. The Australian government was already navigating delicate political territory when the request arrived. Legislative debates on climate policy, Indigenous rights, and economic reform were underway. Public attention was highly focused on domestic issues. Introducing a high-profile royal visit could have overshadowed these priorities, giving the impression that the government was more concerned with celebrity than governance. In a world where optics matter more than ever, timing is everything. And there's a hidden layer here too: international diplomacy. Australia's relationship with the monarchy is not isolated. It interacts with broader Commonwealth politics. Inviting Harry and Meghan, particularly given their fraught relationship with the palace, could have been interpreted as taking sides in a global narrative of royal disputes. The risk of diplomatic missteps, subtle media framing, and political blowback was high. Albanese's rejection, while seemingly harsh, was a preemptive measure designed to control outcomes rather than react to them. But politics and public sentiment alone don't tell the full story. There is also the personal element, the way leaders perceive individuals beyond their titles. Anthony Albanese is known to value integrity, consistency, and respect for established processes. Harry and Meghan, by all accounts, operate according to their own rules. Their independence, while admirable to some, can be seen as unpredictable or even destabilizing to others. For a prime minister, managing a visit from a couple who might dictate their own schedule, issue unsolicited statements, or overshadow official engagements is a logistical and reputational challenge. It's not just politics, it's risk management. Then comes the subtle but powerful aspect of public messaging. By rejecting the visit decisively, the Prime Minister sends multiple signals at once. To the Australian public, it communicates that their government prioritizes national interests and public sentiment over celebrity influence. To the media, it sets the narrative before controversies can arise. To the monarchy, it establishes boundaries, reinforcing that political leaders can, and will, make decisions independently of royal pressure. And to Harry and Meghan, it's a reminder that charm and fame alone do not guarantee access or influence. Interestingly, insiders suggest that this decision was influenced not just by domestic factors, but by whispers from within the Commonwealth. Advisors, diplomats, and even former palace staff reportedly cautioned that another visit could backfire, triggering unwanted comparisons to past controversies and reigniting criticism about the couple's public conduct. Australia, in this context, became the first domino, a test of whether hosting the Sussexes was worth the gamble. The answer, it seems, was no. Public perception also intertwines with cultural identity. Australia prides itself on being independent, egalitarian, and occasionally irreverent toward hierarchy. Hosting figures like Harry and Meghan is not just a ceremonial choice. It is a statement about what Australia values, celebrates, and tolerates. Allowing a visit from a couple seen as polarizing could clash with these national values, especially when social media amplifies every critique and viral moment can spiral globally within hours. There's also an economic angle. High-profile royal visits, while glamorous, come with significant costs: security, logistics, staffing, media management, and potential disruptions to public infrastructure. For a government balancing budgets and prioritizing domestic initiatives, these expenses are never trivial. Critics of the visit pointed out that taxpayer dollars could be better spent addressing pressing issues rather than facilitating celebrity appearances. The decision, therefore, reflects not only political and cultural considerations, but practical financial judgment as well. And then there is the symbolic factor. Australia's refusal isn't just a rejection of a visit. It's a statement about autonomy and self-determination. It signals that the nation is willing to assert its voice in the Commonwealth, independent of royal expectations or media narratives. By saying no, Australia reminds the world that it can navigate its relationships with the monarchy, the media, and international opinion on its own terms. But let's not underestimate the emotional undercurrents. The rejection reportedly stirred strong reactions within both the Sussex camp and the Prime Minister's office. In Montecito, Meghan's team scrambled to strategize, while Harry reportedly questioned why a country that once embraced them so warmly would now close its doors. Inside Canberra, advisors debated, reassessed, and even questioned whether the decision had been too harsh. The tension wasn't just about policy, it was about reputation, perception, and control. And here's the kicker. Insiders claim that even before the official rejection, signals were being sent. Media leaks hinted at reluctance, unofficial statements suggested caution, and advisors quietly urged patience. The Prime Minister's office wasn't acting in isolation. They were responding to a combination of domestic sentiment, international optics, and careful political calculus. The no that landed in Harry and Meghan's inbox was the culmination of months of observation, analysis, and strategic consideration. So when we ask why Australia said, "Not this time," the answer is not simple. It's a tangled web of politics, public opinion, logistical risk, and cultural symbolism. It's about timing, optics, reputation, and control. It's about protecting national interests while managing the unpredictable influence of two of the world's most famous figures. And it's about asserting boundaries, both for the Prime Minister and for the nation. And yet, even with all these reasons laid out, there is one piece missing. One question that lingers. What exactly tipped the scale toward rejection? Who made the final call? Was it a calculated political risk, a response to public pressure, or something else entirely? Something personal, hidden, and potentially explosive? Because while the public sees a simple no, the reality is far more complicated. Every decision, every word in that email, every hesitation, every whisper in the corridors of Canberra tells a story that goes beyond politics. It tells a story about power, perception, and the delicate dance between a celebrity couple and a sovereign nation trying to navigate its identity in a changing world. And just when you think the explanation is complete, insiders hint at an even more surprising layer. A connection between this rejection and a much earlier, secret intervention from Buckingham Palace. That intervention, subtle yet decisive, raises questions about the unseen influence of the monarchy in Australia's decision-making process. What was said behind closed doors? Who whispered advice that may have tipped the balance? And how did that advice intertwine with the Prime Minister's own calculations to produce the most public, most definitive rejection Harry and Meghan have faced in years? Before Australia's Prime Minister issued the high-profile rejection that rocked the media, there was a first attempt. A quieter, subtler, almost invisible effort to return to the land that once embraced Harry and Meghan. Most people never heard about it. The public knew nothing. It was a visit that was supposed to be smooth, ceremonial, and low-key, but it never made it past the planning stage. And what happened during that period set the stage for the explosive rejection we've just seen. It began with hope. Harry and Meghan, at that time, still keenly aware of Australia's symbolic importance, envisioned a visit that would reconnect them with the Commonwealth, showcase their charitable initiatives, and polish the remnants of their public image after years of controversy. This wasn't meant to be a media circus. This wasn't meant to spark headlines or protests. It was meant to be measured, thoughtful, strategic. A visit that could demonstrate that, despite tensions elsewhere, the couple could still be welcomed abroad. Inside the Sussex camp, excitement mixed with cautious planning. Advisors drafted itineraries. Meetings were held over secure video calls. Invitations were informally floated to local dignitaries. Everything was moving carefully, almost imperceptibly. The goal was clear. Make a quiet, positive impression that would reinforce their narrative as mature, independent, and socially conscious figures. But then, a wrinkle appeared, and it came from a source that neither Harry nor Meghan could fully control. According to insiders, Buckingham Palace quietly intervened. This was not public knowledge. No press releases, no official statements, no leaks. Just a subtle, behind-the-scenes nudge from the highest levels of the monarchy. Some say it was a whisper from aides close to King Charles himself, cautioning that even a low-key visit could be misinterpreted, mishandled, or exploited by media hungry for sensational headlines. Others suggest palace advisors were concerned that the timing could create diplomatic complications or that Harry and Meghan might overshadow official Commonwealth events. Whatever the reasoning, the message was clear. This visit cannot proceed, at least not now. The Sussexes were reportedly frustrated. They had invested time, energy, and emotion into a plan they believed would be successful. To have it quietly shut down by unseen hands felt, by all accounts, like a betrayal. Meghan, who is known for her meticulous planning and attention to detail, was particularly incensed. For her, the visit represented not just a diplomatic engagement, but a symbolic homecoming. To have it blocked, silently, with no explanation, sent shockwaves through her inner circle. But it wasn't just a matter of personal disappointment. Strategically, this first blocked visit created long-term consequences. The rejection, though subtle, established a precedent. Harry and Meghan could not assume that even countries where they had previously been adored would welcome them back unconditionally. It planted the seed of caution, a recognition that their fame carried as much risk as it did influence. What's more, insiders suggest that the palace's involvement created tension within Harry and Meghan's team. Advisors who had been optimistic about the visit suddenly found themselves questioning whether their guidance would be overruled by forces outside their control. Internal emails, according to sources, reveal frustration, confusion, and a sense that even careful planning could not guarantee success. The first visit, intended to be a triumph, became a lesson in the unpredictable interplay of royal influence, diplomacy, and media scrutiny. And the public never saw it. There were no leaked memos, no scandalous headlines, no Twitter storms. From the outside, nothing appeared to happen. But behind closed doors, the dynamics between Harry, Meghan, and the monarchy were shifting. The quiet failure of this first visit left a mark on the couple, altering their expectations for future engagements and influencing how they approached requests like the one that would eventually be rejected by Prime Minister Albanese. It also shaped the way Australia would later handle the situation. The government, some insiders suggest, was aware, at least indirectly, that a prior attempt had been blocked for complex reasons. They could have interpreted this as a signal. Even if the monarchy did not publicly oppose a visit, there were still layers of complexity, politics, and risk to navigate. The lesson? Proceeding with a Sussex visit was not a straightforward matter. It required careful consideration, and any misstep could have far-reaching consequences. Meanwhile, in Montecito, the emotional fallout of the first attempt continued to simmer. Meghan reportedly felt constrained, frustrated, and increasingly skeptical of the palace's influence. Harry, for his part, became more aware of how internal royal dynamics could intersect with public and international perceptions. The experience shaped their approach to diplomacy, media strategy, and future attempts to secure high-profile engagements. But there was another, less visible consequence: a growing sense of impatience and determination. The first visit's quiet failure planted a seed of resolve. If the palace would not facilitate their return, Harry and Meghan would have to push harder, navigate political channels, and assert their agency in ways they hadn't before. The stage was set for the second request, the one that would ultimately meet the full-throated rejection from the Australian Prime Minister. And yet, even as they prepared for the second attempt, the lessons of the first visit lingered. Internal debates raged within their team. How much risk could they take? How much should they anticipate pushback from governments, media, or palace officials? How could they balance the desire for public engagement with the necessity of strategic discretion? Every decision, every step forward, was informed by the quiet failure that had preceded it. It is important to note that the first visit never became public because it was meticulously managed to avoid embarrassment. The Sussexes, already wary of leaks and media intrusion, relied on advisors and intermediaries to communicate with government officials discreetly. Palace channels were leveraged to signal caution, and internal memos emphasized the need for discretion. In other words, the first attempt failed silently, but intentionally, in a way that preserved appearances and minimized public fallout. This first visit that never happened, however, was far from inconsequential. It provided critical insight into how political and royal channels operate, how public perception can shape behind-the-scenes decisions, and how even high-profile figures like Harry and Meghan are subject to forces beyond their control. It also foreshadowed the more dramatic developments to come: the second visit, the Prime Minister's rejection, and the global attention that followed. So what exactly changed between the first and second attempts? Why did the first visit quietly fail while the second became a public spectacle? Part of the answer lies in timing, as we discussed. Political priorities shifted, public sentiment evolved, and the couple themselves had grown in confidence, determination, and ambition. They were no longer willing to be blocked quietly. The stakes were higher, the media landscape more intense, and the potential impact far more significant. And here's where the drama intensifies. According to insiders, the lessons of the first failed attempt were not fully absorbed. While the Sussexes recognized the importance of strategy, they also underestimated the degree to which political considerations, public opinion, and palace influence could converge. The second request, unlike the first, was too visible, too bold, and too high-profile to be managed quietly. It was always destined to attract attention, and, ultimately, to be rejected in a manner that would make headlines around the world. And so, the first visit, though never seen, quietly shaped the trajectory of what was to come. It laid the groundwork for conflict, exposed the subtle dynamics between the Sussexes and the monarchy, and created a roadmap of risks that would later manifest in the Prime Minister's emphatic refusal. Without understanding this initial attempt, the magnitude of the second rejection, the one that captivated media outlets globally, cannot be fully appreciated. When most people hear about Harry and Meghan's blocked visits to Australia, they think only about politics, public opinion, and the couple's reputation. But there's another dimension that few consider: the quiet influence of King Charles himself. Behind closed doors, the monarch's concerns, guidance, and subtle interventions have shaped the Sussexes' international engagements more than anyone realizes. To understand why Australia said no, we need to look at what King Charles was thinking long before the Prime Minister sent his rejection. Charles is a careful man. He doesn't act impulsively, at least publicly. He considers optics, history, and protocol, all while balancing the enormous pressures of being head of the monarchy during turbulent times. And while Harry and Meghan are no longer senior working royals, their actions still carry symbolic weight. In the Commonwealth, among global media, and within the royal family itself, every move they make reflects, to some extent, on the crown. According to insiders, King Charles had been quietly monitoring Harry and Meghan's activities for years, noting how their public appearances, statements, and media projects could influence perceptions of the monarchy. He reportedly grew concerned that repeated visits to Commonwealth nations, particularly ones with complicated historical ties to Britain, could be interpreted as political gestures rather than ceremonial goodwill. Australia, with its unique position in the Commonwealth, became a focal point. The king's caution was rooted in both symbolism and pragmatism. He wanted to ensure that any royal engagement enhanced rather than undermined the monarchy's standing. It wasn't that Charles opposed Harry and Meghan personally. Sources emphasize that the king recognizes their independence and the choices they've made. His concern, rather, was about timing, optics, and potential fallout. A mismanaged visit, he feared, could overshadow diplomatic relations, inflame media scrutiny, or revive narratives that the family had been trying to manage for years. In other words, his caution was preventive, a preemptive shield against complications rather than a punitive measure. Some insiders suggest that it was this very concern that influenced the first failed attempt to return to Australia. While the Sussexes team had envisioned a low-key, carefully orchestrated visit, the palace reportedly raised concerns about public perception, security logistics, and unintended consequences. A quiet message was sent, advising restraint. The result: the visit never moved forward. This intervention, subtle and unseen by the public, demonstrated the king's desire to balance the couple's freedom with the monarchy's broader responsibilities. But King Charles's concerns didn't stop at the first visit. As the second request approached, his attention intensified. He understood that a formal rejection by a government, particularly a Commonwealth nation, would carry significant consequences for both Harry and Meghan and the monarchy. The risk of public embarrassment, media scrutiny, and international commentary was high. And because Charles is acutely aware of the media's power to shape narratives, He reportedly urged careful consideration before any public statements or interventions occurred. There is also a familial dimension to consider. Charles has long been aware of the tension between Harry, Meghan, and other members of the royal family. While he seeks reconciliation and stability, he is pragmatic about the challenges of managing relationships that are both personal and symbolic. He reportedly communicated discreetly with Australian officials, or at least signaled through intermediaries, that any visit should be handled with care, highlighting potential pitfalls without overtly directing policy. These subtle nudges, though not public, shaped the government's approach and set the stage for the ultimate rejection. And then there's the matter of precedent. King Charles understands the importance of precedent in royal engagements. Every visit, every meeting, every handshake is part of a chain of events that future generations will interpret. If Harry and Meghan were allowed a repeat visit under circumstances that could be seen as controversial, it could establish a precedent that future royal figures might exploit, or that media narratives could distort. By quietly signaling caution, Charles was protecting the institution while navigating the sensitivities of his son and daughter-in-law. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect is how this concern intersected with Australia's own political calculations. While Albanese and his team were weighing public sentiment, security concerns, and media risk, the subtle influence of the palace added another layer of complexity. Even without direct involvement, the monarchy's position became a factor in the government's decision-making. The Prime Minister's office, aware of the nuances and potential implications, understood that any visit carried more than ceremonial weight. It carried symbolic, political, and familial dimensions. There is also the human element. Charles, despite his strategic mind, is a father. He has personal concerns about Harry and Meghan's well-being, their public exposure, and their navigation of global scrutiny. Insiders suggest that the king worries about the toll media frenzy can take on mental health and family dynamics. A visit to Australia, while potentially positive, could also trigger intense scrutiny and unwanted headlines, risks that weigh heavily in the decision-making calculus of both the palace and the government. Interestingly, sources close to Buckingham Palace claim that Charles's concern was never about excluding Harry and Meghan, but about framing the visit in a way that would maximize benefit while minimizing harm. This included considering timing, public messaging, security protocols, and potential media spin. In essence, the king was acting as a quiet guardian, seeking to ensure that any international engagement aligned with broader institutional goals. Yet, despite this careful planning, there is a subtle tension that cannot be ignored. Harry and Meghan are independent actors. Their desire to assert agency, pursue charitable initiatives, and manage their own public narrative sometimes clashes with the monarchy's interest in consistency, symbolism, and strategic messaging. Charles is acutely aware of this dynamic, and it likely informed both the palace's quiet interventions and the ultimate response from Australia's government. This interplay between personal ambition, public perception, and institutional authority is central to understanding why the second visit was rejected so decisively. The Prime Minister's office, informed by political, cultural, and media considerations, acted in a context where palace guidance, family dynamics, and global optics intersected. The rejection was not a simple no. It was the result of multiple layers of calculation, some visible, some hidden, all interrelated. And there's one final layer that makes this chapter particularly compelling: the whispers of tension within the palace itself. While the king sought caution, other advisors reportedly had differing opinions. Some argued that Harry and Meghan's continued engagement with Commonwealth nations could serve as a bridge, a way to modernize perceptions of royalty. Others feared it would exacerbate controversies and create diplomatic headaches. The divergence of opinion reflects the complexity of balancing personal freedom, institutional integrity, and global scrutiny, a balance that the king navigates with extraordinary subtlety. What emerges from all of this is a picture of a monarchy deeply aware of the stakes, a prime minister meticulously calculating the risks, and a couple seeking opportunity in a landscape shaped by both. Charles's quiet concerns, though unseen by the public, are a crucial part of the story. One that helps explain why a nation that once welcomed Harry and Meghan is now unwilling to extend the same invitation. And yet, Even with all these layers understood, the story is far from over. The rejection, the palace's guidance, and public sentiment all intersect to create a tension that is only escalating. The next chapter will reveal the media's role in amplifying this tension, the public's reactions, and how Harry and Meghan responded behind closed doors. Moves that would set the stage for global debate. As soon as news of Australia's rejection hit the headlines, the world erupted. From Canberra to Montecito, from London to Los Angeles, people were talking, tweeting, posting, and speculating. But what makes this story fascinating isn't just the rejection itself. It's the tidal wave of media coverage and public reaction that followed. A perfect storm that exposed the volatility of celebrity, royalty, and politics colliding. Let's start with the traditional media. Within minutes, major outlets ran the story with bold headlines. Australia snubs Sussexes, no royal welcome this time, and PM Albanese rejects Harry and Meghan's visit request. Newsrooms scrambled for context, seeking experts, historians, and insiders who could explain why the Australian Prime Minister had taken such a decisive stance. Analysis pieces quickly emerged, breaking down political risk, public sentiment, and the broader implications for Commonwealth relations. Television news networks were no less frenzied. Live panels debated the decision, dissecting every word of the official statement. Pundits argued passionately. Some framed the rejection as a necessary exercise of national sovereignty. Others criticized it as a public humiliation of two globally recognized figures. Viewers were treated to contrasting perspectives, with each broadcast seeking to generate clicks, ratings, and social media engagement. Meanwhile, social media exploded like fireworks. Twitter and X were dominated by hashtags such as hashtag #NoSussexAustralia, hashtag Albanese says no, and hashtag Royal Drama Down Under. Users posted memes, GIFs, and commentary at lightning speed. Some expressed support for the Prime Minister, applauding the decision as a stand for fiscal responsibility and public interest. Others criticized Australia, claiming the rejection was cold, unnecessary, or petty. Viral threads debated every detail: why the visit was requested, whether the palace influenced the decision, and what the Sussexes' next move would be. Public reaction, however, was not uniform. In Australia, citizens were divided. Some felt relief. The idea of hosting a controversial royal couple again stirred concerns about security costs, media distractions, and public scrutiny. Others felt disappointment, nostalgic for the time when the Sussexes were celebrated for their charm, charisma, and celebrity status. Polls conducted in the days following the announcement revealed roughly half the population supported the Prime Minister's decision, while the other half expressed curiosity or mild frustration. The United Kingdom, predictably, reacted differently. British tabloids framed the rejection as an embarrassment for Harry and Meghan, implying that their influence outside the royal family was waning. Headlines hinted at a dramatic rift. A Commonwealth nation, previously friendly, had drawn a line. Social media commentary in the UK was just as polarized. Fans of the couple lamented the rejection as unfair, while critics highlighted it as a deserved check on their public antics. Across the pond in the United States, the reaction was tinged with celebrity culture. News outlets covered the story as a major entertainment event. Analysts debated the political, PR, and personal implications for the couple, but the framing often leaned toward drama. Sussex snub shocks the world, royal drama down under, and Meghan and Harry denied again. Late-night shows seized on the story, crafting jokes, sketches, and commentary that amplified public engagement. Online, TikTok creators produced viral clips dramatizing the rejection, some sympathetic, others satirical. The global audience was engaged, and the narrative snowballed beyond anyone's expectations. But media frenzy isn't just about entertainment. It has real-world consequences. The volume and intensity of coverage shaped public perception, influenced policymakers, and put pressure on both the Sussexes and the Australian government. Every opinion piece, every viral video, every social media post contributed to a broader conversation about celebrity, responsibility, and power. In a sense, the media became a character in this story, an unpredictable, relentless force shaping the narrative in real time. And then there was speculation. Who leaked the email? Was it the Prime Minister's office, the palace, or an anonymous source within the Australian bureaucracy? How much of the decision was influenced by King Charles's quiet guidance, and how much was purely a political calculation? The media ran wild with theories, fueling debate, controversy, and intrigue. Every new angle added another layer to a story that was already captivating global audiences. In Montecito, the media frenzy created its own challenges. Harry and Meghan, long accustomed to intense scrutiny, found themselves navigating an entirely new landscape. They were not only dealing with the rejection, but also with the public spectacle that accompanied it. Sources say Meghan's team was working around the clock, drafting statements, coordinating interviews, and planning messaging strategies to contain damage and protect the couple's image. Harry, meanwhile, reportedly focused on private discussions with advisors, considering next steps and long-term strategies in light of the media storm. The frenzy also highlighted contradictions. Some outlets praised the Sussexes' previous contributions, charitable work, and modernizing influence, while simultaneously criticizing their public persona and media strategy. Supporters argued that the rejection was petty and unnecessary, while detractors claimed it was a long-overdue accountability measure. These conflicting narratives created tension, leaving the public uncertain, engaged, and emotionally invested. Every new article or viral post reignited the conversation, keeping the story alive in the global consciousness. And yet, even as headlines dominated news cycles, there were subtler, more complex reactions at play. Diplomatic observers noted that the rejection, amplified by media coverage, could influence relations between Australia and the broader Commonwealth. They speculated that other countries might reconsider inviting the couple, weighing public sentiment and political optics before extending formal invitations. The media frenzy, therefore, was not just entertainment. It was shaping the future of royal engagement and international diplomacy. Interestingly, this media storm also exposed a cultural phenomenon: the global obsession with the Sussexes. Despite decades of royal history, the couple's story resonates uniquely with modern audiences. Their mix of celebrity, charity, controversy, and media savvy creates a narrative that is irresistible to the public. The media frenzy following Australia's rejection is a reflection of that allure, a fascination that blends admiration, criticism, and voyeuristic curiosity into a global spectacle. And yet, amid the frenzy, a crucial question remained unanswered: how would Harry and Meghan respond? Would they accept the rejection gracefully, push back publicly, or attempt to find alternative routes to Australia? The media speculated endlessly, but only the couple could answer. Insiders suggest that discussions behind closed doors were intense, emotional, and strategic, a delicate balancing act between image, ambition, and diplomacy. And here's the cliffhanger: the media frenzy was only the beginning. Behind the headlines, deeper tensions were simmering, involving political maneuvering, palace dynamics, and private confrontations that the public could not see. The world saw the rejection, the headlines, the memes, the viral clips, but what happened behind closed doors in Montecito was a story very few would ever witness. Harry and Meghan, like any high-profile public figures, had to navigate not just the public fallout but the deeply personal impact of being turned away by a nation they once cherished. Their private response reveals not just their strategy, but the tension, emotion, and stakes that the global headlines could never fully capture. The initial reaction, according to sources close to the couple, was a mixture of shock and frustration. Harry, who had always considered Australia a welcoming part of the Commonwealth, reportedly felt blindsided. He had expected at least a cautious dialogue, if not a formal invitation. The outright refusal, communicated with a firmness that left little room for negotiation, struck him as both surprising and deeply disappointing. Meghan, on the other hand, reportedly experienced a surge of indignation. Known for her strategic mind and attention to detail, she had anticipated potential challenges, but not an outright rejection. Sources suggest she felt that the denial reflected not just political calculation, but an underestimation of their influence and global reach. Her immediate response was to call an urgent meeting with advisors, her team of communications experts, and legal counsel to assess options, messaging, and potential next steps. The private meetings were intense. Advisors discussed every nuance of the rejection, the language used by Prime Minister Albanese, the timing of the public announcement, and the media's immediate amplification. Every detail was scrutinized for potential leverage, potential missteps, and potential impact on their public image. Harry and Meghan approached the discussion with a dual mindset, emotionally invested, yet strategically disciplined. They understood that any private reaction could easily become public, and that missteps could be seized upon by media outlets hungry for controversy. There were also discussions about the palace's indirect role in the situation. While Charles's concerns had been subtle and mostly behind the scenes, Harry and Meghan reportedly interpreted the quiet interventions as a constraint on their agency. It wasn't just a government saying no. It was a reminder that the monarchy, even from afar, still exerted influence on their movements. This added an additional layer of complexity and emotion to their private deliberations. In private, Harry reportedly expressed a mixture of disappointment and resolve. Sources indicate he was reflective about the symbolic nature of the rejection, seeing it as a test of resilience, a signal that influence without formal power has limits, and a reminder that navigating the Commonwealth required finesse and strategic patience. He allegedly framed it as an opportunity to reassess priorities and strengthen their global engagements in a more controlled, deliberate manner. Meghan's approach, according to insiders, was different but complementary. She reportedly focused on media strategy and narrative management, understanding that public perception would be as important as any private resolution. Her team brainstormed messaging options, potential interviews, and ways to address speculation without inflaming tension. Meghan, known for her meticulous preparation, reportedly drafted multiple contingency plans, including alternative initiatives in regions more receptive to their presence. Interestingly, there was also an emotional dimension that the public rarely sees. Both Harry and Meghan reportedly expressed frustration at the personal nature of the rejection. They felt that their past contributions, charitable work, and the goodwill they had built were being overshadowed by politics, media narratives, and public sentiment. Sources claim that they had internal conversations about fairness, recognition, and legacy. Debates that, while deeply personal, influenced their public posture and strategic choices. At the same time, the couple remained aware of the optics. Any overt criticism of the Australian government could be spun negatively in global media, creating a backlash that would harm both their reputation and ongoing initiatives. This tension between emotion and strategy, personal grievance and public responsibility, defined much of their private response. In addition to strategic discussions, there were practical considerations. Advisors reportedly evaluated security logistics, timing, and potential alternative engagements. Would they attempt a private visit, behind-the-scenes initiatives, or media appearances to maintain influence without provoking further controversy? Each option was weighed carefully, with Harry and Meghan insisting on control over both narrative and execution. The private response also included contingency planning for international perception. Sources reveal that the Sussexes were concerned about how the rejection might influence relationships in other Commonwealth nations. Would other countries see Australia's refusal as precedent? Would it embolden critics or affect invitations elsewhere? Harry and Meghan reportedly strategized on how to frame their next moves to avoid setting a negative pattern, all while maintaining their independence and public identity. There were also moments of personal reflection. Harry, in particular, is said to have been contemplative about his role within the royal family and how his public persona intersected with diplomatic realities. He reportedly weighed the benefits of continued high-profile engagements against the challenges of managing perception, expectation, and family relationships. Meghan, too, reflected on her position, balancing advocacy, personal ambition, and global influence with the risks inherent in public scrutiny. Despite the initial frustration, insiders emphasized that the couple remained committed to forward momentum. Their private response was not simply reactive, it was proactive. They discussed alternative initiatives, philanthropic projects, and media opportunities that could reinforce their mission while avoiding political backlash. In other words, they were pivoting strategically, turning a rejection into a chance to redefine their engagement on their own terms. And yet, the emotional impact lingered. Sources report private conversations in which Harry and Meghan discussed feelings of being underestimated, misunderstood, and unfairly constrained. These discussions were candid, raw, and emotionally charged, a side of the story rarely visible to the public. It is this emotional backdrop that provides context for their later public statements, media appearances, and subsequent attempts to engage with Commonwealth nations. But the private response wasn't uniform. There were tensions within their team about how to balance strategy with emotion. Some advisors urged caution, warning against any public statements that could be misinterpreted. Others encouraged bold moves, emphasizing the importance of asserting influence and maintaining visibility. Harry and Meghan reportedly mediated these tensions, striving to unify their team.